Uploading files directly to S3 is useful in many cases. In this screencast, I'll show you how it's done. Let's get started. So here we have a photo blog application, and I'd like to add the ability to upload a new photo to it. So let's open up the code and get started. First, let's add a file input to our posts template. Back in our browser, we can see that input showing up now, but it looks terrible, so let's add some CSS. Okay, we've got a decent looking upload button with the default functionality of opening the file dialog when clicked. Now, I host my app's images on S3, so traditionally I'd create a form, post the file to my server, and then have the server upload the image to S3. I'd then sit around waiting for S3 to respond to my server, and then my server to respond to my front-end application before I'd show the image. Instead of all of that, I want my front end to upload images securely and directly to S3. The Ember add-on called ember-uploader, created by Joshua Borton & Co., is perfect for what I need. It's already got an Ember CLI counterpart package, so setup is going to be easy. Let's start using it. First, we'll install ember-uploader and generate our file upload component. Now, back in our code, we'll start by deleting the auto-generated file upload component template, as we won't be needing that. Next, we're going to rename our component to S3upload, as that's a little more declarative. Now, let's get a basic ember-uploader component going. We're going to extend our component from ember-uploader.file field. Without doing anything else, let's head back to our posts template and swap out our file input for our S3 upload component to make sure there haven't been any regressions so far. Now you don't have to include an ID like I'm doing here, but I'm using the label as the UI button to trigger the file dialog, so I need the ID for the browser to sync the label to the input. Now back in our browser, everything looks the same. I can still click the label and see the file dialog appear. Good. So let's add a little more logic to our ember-uploader. I'm going to add a URL property here that I'll come back to in a bit. The main place for our upload logic is going to be in an observer method we'll call filesDidChange, and it observes our element's files attribute. Next, let's localize some variables and create an instance of the ember-uploader object. We'll just call it uploader. Then, when this function is called, if the files property is not empty, i.e. we've selected files, let's fire an alert. So let's test this out in the browser. We'll select a file and yep, there's an alert. Great. So our basic plumbing is in place. So let's remove that alert and actually upload the file. We'll just call our uploader and pass it the first file instance in the files array. So let's see what happens in our browser. You'll notice that when we upload a file, it's not doing anything with S3 at all. It's just posting that file directly to my server. That's not what I want. But it's nice to know that the ember-uploader has this default functionality. In the future, we could rename our component back to file upload and pass in the upload type as an attribute. But I digress. One thing to note, you're seeing a post going to localhost 4200. That's because I'm proxying all of my requests through Ember CLI to localhost 3000, where my API lives. In order to start working with S3, let's change our uploader method to S3uploader. This method houses all of the front-end functionality we need for uploading to S3. Back in our browser, when we select an image to upload, we can now see that there is an errant request going out to our API with the path /sign. You can learn more about what signing is on many different websites, but the TLDR is that to upload things to Amazon, you need to be authenticated. So our API needs to create a signed request and send that back to our front end to use when it uploads to S3. I've got a little happy server running here. Now ordinarily I would leave this part out, but it's a little tricky, interesting, so I'll just show it quickly. I'm going to create a route and define my handler. Now let's create the handler. So first we're going to create a policy and a signature using a simple signing service that I made. We'll pass in our AWS secret, the ACL for the item, the bucket we want to upload to, and the date the policy should expire. Now, Once we have that policy, we can reply with the fields that ember-uploader needs: the ACL, the S3 access key, the bucket to upload to, a cache control header, a content type header, the expiry, the key, which is the path to upload the image to, the policy, and the signature that we generated in the service above. Finally, the status code we want back on a successful upload. So let's just have a quick look at the policy service. So our client requests a signed URL from our server, passing it the information that it knows about the file, the name, the type, etc. We then create an S3 policy, which is just a base64 encoded JSON object that tells S3 what permission our signed URL has, which bucket it can upload to, the ACL in the file we're uploading, and when that authorization, our signed URL, should expire. Next, we need to create the signature and sign the policy. We HMAC, or hash message authentication code, encrypt our policy using our S3 secret, and that's it. We then return the policy and the signature. When we upload to S3, if the signature can't be unwrapped using our S3 secret or contains parameters different than those we signed, the authentication on S3 will fail. Now, this is just a simple Node implementation of this service. On the GitHub site for the ember-uploader, if you're a Rails person, ember-uploader's GitHub wiki has complete instructions for you. So now back in our browser, when we go to upload a file, a call to sign the URL fails again. Well, when we look at the URL, it's posting to /sign, but our API's routes are set up to access this request at /posts/sign. So let's jump back into our component and tell the ember-uploader what URL to use for signing its requests. Now back in the browser, we can see our sign request is finally passing, and then we can see a call going out to S3. But that S3 call is failing. When I look at the response from the failed request, I'm not really seeing anything to help. So I'm going to copy the request as curl and run it in the terminal. And of course, it's a CORS error. We need to let our S3 bucket know that our localhost domain is allowed to upload things to it. So we'll open our S3 console and replace the default CORS policy with a new policy that allows get, put, and post from origin localhost 4200. Now back in our browser, we can upload an image and everything is passing. Great, but it's unclear visually that it's successful. Let's start by adding an alert when an upload is successful. The ember-uploader component emits different events that we can tie into. So we'll add a listener on our uploader's didUpload hook. Okay, great. That's working. Now the response we're getting back from S3 is XML. Let's parse that XML and get the full URL as well as just the key and console log the result. And back in our browser, after a successful upload, we can now verify that we have access to that URL and key in JSON. So that's great, but not so great. We want that new image to show up in our template as soon as it's been uploaded. So let's refactor our component to expose an onComplete action. In our controller, we'll set up an ember-upload-complete action and pass that through to our component. Let's first just make sure our wiring is set up correctly. If it all works, we should see an alert saying image upload complete. And we do. So since I don't actually have a post method on my API right now, I'm just going to mock this in. We're going to create a new Ember object, fill it with my image's details, and then add that to the controller's model manually. Now, one disclaimer here. In preparing for this screencast, I originally had this method in my route, but then while recording, I decided to move it into my controller, but I didn't update the code accordingly. So here I'm using this.controller for posts when I don't really need to, so I apologize for my post-production laziness. So now we can see once an upload completes, it shows up in the UI. Perfect. To keep exploring, it'd be nice to get a sense of progress when my images are uploading. Just like did upload, ember-uploader also has a progress hook. So let's just console log out when we get back from that event. So we can see that we're getting a % back. That's great because that's what we wanted anyways. So let's create an onProgress action on the component and send that action on progress events. We'll add that attribute in our posts template, and then set up a method in our controller that will take the data from that action, the %complete, and set a controller property that will hold that value. Now, let's add that property to our controller and then update our template to show the progress. Cool. So now when I upload an image, we can see that progress indicator incrementing. Let's round that percentage number so it doesn't break our button. Now back in our browser, we upload an image and great. Our button no longer breaks and our percentage is an integer. Let's refactor our template to only show the percentage if an upload is in progress, i.e., the image upload percentage is not null. Now back in our browser, we can see that we start with a clean button. When we start an upload, our percentage and % appears. Once the upload is done, that percentage stays. So let's go back to our onComplete handler and set the image upload percentage property in the controller back to null when the upload is completed. Now we can see once the upload is completed and added to the DOM, our button returns to a clean state. So that's pretty much full circle. Up until this point, we've only covered uploading individual images. What if we want to upload multiple? When I open the file dialog here, I can only select one file. Let's reopen our S3 upload component and we'll add a new ember-uploader property, multiple. By just doing that, we can now open our file dialog and select multiple files. However, when I click open, only the first file is uploaded. Some further refactoring is required. Back in our S3 upload component, we can see at the bottom here that we are explicitly telling the uploader to upload the first item in the files array. Let's refactor that to have it loop through each item in the files array and upload each. Now back in the browser, I can select a bunch of images and see them all start to appear. Now I probably should have created individual progress bars for each file upload, but I'll leave that to you. To be thorough, we can also see in the console here that when we upload multiple files, a separate sign-in call is made to our server for each file. So that's it. I think this is a great and useful add-on, and I'd like to thank all of the contributors who worked on it, and Joshua Borton for both starting and being the main contributor on it. You've truly made my life easier. Thanks for watching. This is Kyle from Build Lab.